Annie, you and I were involved in the East Gippsland Building Community Resilience after the 2013-14 fires to both better prepare communities for future events, but also to involve agencies so they had a better relationship with working with community people. And since you've been the coordinator of the neighbourhood house, and the fact that the neighbourhood house is here is one of the outcomes from the first project.
I think it was absolutely fantastic, which we identified in that project, that we needed a community hub, that we needed a central point of information that was probably a bit more of a community space than the general store, which is what. So we were able to provide, when the fires first hit, which was a year ago today, we were able to provide a place of respite. A lot of people were at home on their own, and they would come in for an hour or two, have a cup of tea, just have a bit of a break from the stress over that first sort of 6 weeks from when the fires hit to impact the first impact. So that was really great, and it was really great to be able to give people kits that we had from Red Cross, from CFA, leaving early kits, those sort of things that they just knew they could come. It was respite, referral if they needed it, if they needed help. Then once we had impact and we came back to work very early in January, then it became about the donations. Dealing with the donations was the very first thing that we did as a group, and because we had the neighbourhood house, even though we were only, how old were we then? 9 months? 9 months old? Not even a year. We just had a network and a pool of volunteers that we were able to draw on, and we had a telephone, and we had an email address, and we had all of those things that enabled us to process those donations, and we did that very well. We were able to set up a supply centre, small supply centre in Vurrn for those people returning from evacuation then, and also providing just that human contact, and often sitting and listening for a while to their stories, because some of them were really sad, and some of them, and people needed to talk. And East Gippsland was inundated, and those early months before the agencies came in, the neighbourhood house here in Vurrn was really integral in filling that space. So what we really need is local people employed to do a job, and we've got a structure that we can identify that with our community recovery committee. But we find that that funding it sometimes doesn't give us that, and we get offers from outside the community, whereas we want to build people in the community up in this process.
Of course. It was Kilmany Uniting Care at the time, funded local people to do graduate training, so they got accredited courses, and those people are all out there employed. And they're from all different backgrounds, but giving them qualifications meant they stayed here, they stayed in the community, and it was a double dipping, if you like. Our centre got the funding, we paid for the students' fees, and the fees to the university employed me. So we made it work in a number of ways.
But for me, planning went back to 1988 when we decided to build a house out here. You know, the block of land was surrounded by trees, still is. We said we're in a bushfire area, we need to plan for that. So we built a house on a concrete slab, we built out of stone. We basically cleared the gum trees from around it and planted deciduous trees. So I think they were major factors in saving the house, and I always felt that we could, we could save the house. Yes. So for that reason I stayed, and at no point did I feel as though I was going to lose my life, and very early on it was apparent the house wasn't going to burn. What went was my big shed, which had 3 wooden boats that I'd built over the last few years, my stagecoach and my wagonette that I'd had built quite some years ago, a lot of horse harness, some that I made myself, and a lot of various bits and pieces for horses. You know, I had a huge amount stuck in the shed, and our caravan went, my tractor went, a lot of machinery went. So the fire had even though we saved the house, the fire did have a big impact. And how do you recover from that? You know, I mean, we're
called the God of Fire. This year I met the God of Fire, malevolent and capricious, an autocratic ruler of his domain. We dread his powerful touch. That night his halo crowned every hill around me. His visible spirit hovered above the trees, an aurora burning the sky. Unlike the God of love whose word is whispered, this God spoke clearly in my ears. "Leave now," he said. I did. And he laughed at me. He touched the grass to my left, and lit a flame. He rushed into the gully to my right, sweeping fast and angry down the hill, bent over in the wind and cackling. He killed our 4 horses and 2 kangaroos, a living sacrifice. He followed down the hill, lighting a wall of flame behind me. After he had passed, fences, gates and trees glowed deep red against a thick black sky, a city of sin. Everything was dripping wet, and he halted. This year I met the God of Fire. Eyeball to eyeball we met. He blinked, and I won.
The hall has always been a focal point in the community, even in my father's day. That's why they established the hall. It was a focal point for community to come socially and in times of danger or emergency or meetings or information exchange. Call it what you like, but it was the focal point. So we've always tried to maintain it as a clear area with a water source, with basics. But the night the fire came, which was inevitable, and we had 30 people, we had 15 dogs, we had 6 horses. Doesn't sound much, but to those people it was their place of last resort. Well, after the fire went through and we formed the committee, we set some objectives. You know, there were people struggling with housing and returning to their farms and getting on with their lives, you know, and we got asked to form a community-led recovery committee to try and to help the community recover. You know. At the time that sounded like a really good idea, and there were lots of promises of there'll be money and there'll be help and there'll be, you know, all sorts of things. There'll be counsellors, there'll be lots of stuff happen. But as time's worn on, we're 11 months down the track, we've still got some unresolved issues. We're still waiting for a lot of funding. We've applied for a lot of funding through groups and grants that have been rejected. We've got some.
I think with our situation as well, our farm was going through a very tough 3-year drought.
Of course.
And we'd been in the midst of making some pretty horrible decisions.
Yes.
In the 12 months previous to the fires. So even though, like, our adrenaline and everything, once the fire went through, we were beat as soon as it went through, and it was really hard for us to come back and try and rebuild and rethink and redo what we'd already got to.
Yes.
We saw in the community things getting done straight away, and we were beat. We sat back, and it has taken us 12 months to really think about what we want to do. I don't know why. It seems like it should be simple. We wanted to be back out here, or we felt we wanted to be back out here, but it was heartbreaking to be out here as well.
Francine, you were involved in planning some of the on paper community planning.
Yes, we had so many meetings and so many ideas and information coming from all sources, and it just comes in. It's very hard to absorb much of that, so it was really good to put it down on a visual plan that everyone can look at and and we can. Julie's already worked on it now. We can build on it. We'll just keep building on it, and it'll form the really good basis for. Once we're able to meet with the larger community, we'll put that to the larger community and get feedback.
Yes.
And it's good for us too, because for the first time it's summarised. Well, that's why we're so tired. We really
Yes.
have done a lot of work.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that just don't. They want to have opinions, and they'll have opinions, but trying to get them to engage in a way that's constructive
Yes.
takes time. It
Yeah.
takes many conversations. It doesn't happen
No.
by just putting it out there and expecting people to respond.
I mean, with COVID again, we had some community breakfasts immediately after the fire, and they were a great success.
Yes.
People were able to come, have some breakfast, chat, find
Not
out
a
some
meeting,
information.
just
No, not a meeting.
No, and go on and do a day's work, which they all needed to do.
yes.
Yeah.
And of course, when COVID came along, we couldn't do that anymore.
It's
And all of our bureaucratic partners disappeared onto Zoom, you know. And
yes.
They were the first to go.
90% of this population doesn't even know what Zoom is, let alone have the facilities to get on the platform.
And-
I know the wheels of bureaucracy grind slowly, as Matty says. It takes a long time, but simplification of systems, of grant applications, of just we don't want handouts, but we want hand-ups, of course, as everybody says. But we need a simple process where we
Yes.
can get some runs on the board and people can see things happening and say those guys are
Some
working
hope.
for us and they're
Yeah.
doing a good job.
Okay, I might sit there and think that other communities that weren't flame affected like this one, they would have to jump through a few extra hoops. But I think for communities like Wawira, Sarsfield, Buchan, Malakuta, that they shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to fight against them either to obtain funding. We should be getting a little bit more compassion, a little bit more support in those regards. I think is